Tiny Epic Cthulhu is a cooperative game for 1 to 4 players. You take on the role of an investigator in the town of New Arkham. It is a game about balancing resources and embracing the chaos released by Cthulhu legends. Your investigators go to different locations collecting madness tentacles to power up their abilities. These tentacles are also used as a resource to translate the pages of the Necronomicon. Once you've translated all the pages, you've weakened Cthulhu, and now you use those pages against it to shut the 6 portals that have been opened to release the chaos on the city. Keep one thing in mind. Cthulhu's doing everything to stop you and increase your delirium till you go insane. If this sounds like fun, you too can spin the wheel of madness. Let's get into this. Welcome to Solitary RPG. Welcome to Tiny Epic Cthulhu. This is a game by Gamelin Games, and it is part of the Tiny Epic series. This is one of the latest releases, and this is going to be video 1 of a 3-part video. In this video, I'm just going to do a broad brushstroke about the rules, just to see if this is a game you might be interested in. In the second video, we're going to go into setup. The Tiny Epic series is a great series of games. They're in a small box, however, they still give you that big box experience of a board game. But to do that, you have a lot of cards that you need to set up to create the player board and everything like that. So we'll do a video just talking about that. And in that video, we'll spin the Wheel of Madness a few times, take a couple turns, so that you can actually see the mechanics in action. And in the third video, we're going to talk about the solo rules that were written for the game and talk about the expansion material. So let's get into Tiny Epic Cthulhu. Each player's turn is broken down into 2 phases. You have the spin the Wheel of Madness phase, and then you have their action phase. The game itself is also broken down into 2 phases. The first phase of the game, you are trying to translate all the pages of the Necronomicon. Once you've translated all those pages, you're going to do a simple reset, which is flipping the Cthulhu card over, because now you're going to take your translated pages from the Necronomicon to shut the 6 portals that Cthulhu has been using to release shamblers on the city. So we'll take an overview of the player's turn and kind of just break things down so you kind of have a general understanding of how the game's played. One of the main focuses of the game are these tentacles. And every turn you're going to be populating those tentacles on the different city cards. Just to let you know, each city card is double-sided and they have actions on them. So this is the park, and the one side of the action says move 1, 2, 3, or 3 of the same colored madness tentacles from the Shambler's mat to the discard mat. That's a cool ability. Then on the other side, it's move 1 tentacle of each color from the Shambler mat to the discard mat. So this adds a little bit more randomness when you're setting up your game, because you can just mix up the cards. You don't know which abilities you're going to get, and the combination of abilities just makes each game a little bit different. So that's a really neat feature. You're also going to notice on your player cards that you have this side, which has a player ability. So each of the different characters have a player ability. This is where you're going to place your tentacles as you collect them. And this is your delirium tracker. And this actually allows you re-rolls when you're trying to banish shamblers or close the portals. But if you reach maximum, you go insane and the Cthulhu wins. And that is one of the win conditions in the game. The second win condition is if you're not able to stop Cthulhu before reaching maximum power, then Cthulhu wins. On the other side, this side, there's no ability. Everything else is pretty much the same. And this is for the solo rules. So just make sure when you're setting up, you're for a regular game, not a solo game, you are using the side with the ability. So this game's already been set up according to the rules. The rules are really clear on how to do all the setup. And what we're going to want to do is spin the wheel of madness to set up our characters. And this is one of the cool parts about this game is the wheel of madness. Now this is one long tentacle, but as you can see, I know my light's kind of blurring out some of the detail, but there's actually a lot of detail on the tentacle. One side has this little bump or nodule or growth or whatever you want to call it on the tentacle. That represents the front of the pointer, and on the back there's no nodule or anything. That represents the tail or the back side of the wheel of madness. And we need to place our characters. So what we'll do is we'll spin, and wherever the pointer is pointing, we will place our characters. And one of the cool parts about the rules is if the pointer lands on a line or really close to a line and you're like, I don't know if that's it or not, the rules simply say move it slightly clockwise till you have a defined location. And that just resolves any arguments that might be taking place. Sometimes you're like, dang it, I really needed it to go the other way, counterclockwise. That's the one I wanted. Unfortunately, Cthulhu is evil and just ruins my day sometimes. So that's how you use the pointer on the wheel of madness. Just defining the front from the back. So let's talk about the wheel itself. Now this is one of those games where you're going to be flicking the wheel and you may get a little aggressive or amped up because things are going good or bad, and you're going to get a little aggressive hitting it. One of the things that Gamelin Games did is they put kind of like this rubber textured material on the bottom of the spinner to help keep it in place, so it's just not cardboard, especially if you're playing on like a really polished table or smooth surface and you flick it too hard and then just destroys your board. So they put a little bit of rubber material on it, but you don't really have to flick it hard to get it to spin, so you can take it kind of easy. One of the things they did is if you do get the player mat, I'm not a big fan of player mats for all my games, but the player mat for this particular game, which we will talk about more in the setup video, actually has a cutout, so it's more practical for this particular game. Has a cutout in the center that the wheel of madness will set into, preventing it from, unless you got someone really aggressive at your table, but that should prevent it from moving around, keeping your board secured. So to start the first phase of a player turn is you spin the Wheel of Madness. The Wheel of Madness is Cthulhu's turn. And what you're doing, it's a little bit like an AI. You're doing all Cthulhu stuff for him. You're doing Cthulhu's bidding. And that's what it's like about embracing the chaos. And wherever the front pointer lands, you're going to take that action. Now you can already see I kind of landed on a spot that's a little bit on the edge, but all you got to do is slightly turn it. You don't turn it too much because the tail end, this is where we're going to take some action as well. But you're going to take whatever action on the discard mat. I have most of it covered up right now, unfortunately, just trying to keep everything on the screen. On the discard mat, it will give you the instructions for all of the different actions that you're going to take. This one says move a chaos tentacle from the general supply onto the discard mat. This purple one is a chaos tentacle. These are really good tentacles. These are like a wild tentacle, or they give you some extra turn if you want to spend them that way. And you would just put them on this discard mat. So every time you spin the Wheel of Madness, you take the action that it lands on, and then you've got to populate tentacles in the city that it also landed on. And the way you determine the number of tentacles that you're going to pull is based on Cthulhu's power. The game starts with Cthulhu at the beginning of this track, And the number to the right of the marker, and that's the marker for Cthulhu, the number to the right is the number of tentacles you're going to pull out of the bag. And we have 4 different colored tentacles. Let me show you those. You have green tentacles. So when your character grabs a green tentacle and puts it on their board, this is greed. And this tentacle actually allows you to pull more tentacles when you're visiting a city or investigating a city. We'll get into that in a little bit more. Red tentacles are rage. So when you banish a shambler, they have tentacles in the abyss, and you will pull them out of the abyss and put them onto the discard mat. So that's how you kind of build your discard pile. Blue tentacles are fear. This allows you to move around the board more. And the black tentacles, these are eldritch tentacles. And these go on your Cthulhu. And everything in this game has a breaking point. It's called being accursed. So you'll see these squares on the city. You got 3 red squares, 3 blue, 3 green. Once you've placed 3 blue tentacles in this blue square, on the 4th tentacle, the blue become accursed. All those tentacles, the blue tentacles, will go into the shamblers, kind of go into the abyss. You no longer have access to them until you bring them back down to your discard. And then you take an action from your Cthulhu for whichever color went accursed, and you resolve that action. Shamblers also do the same thing. So once you've put 3 shamblers on a city location, and we're just going to kind of set this up, on that 4th one that you place, the shamblers become accursed. So you'll take all the shamblers and put them back into their holding spot or into the abyss. I'm going to leave this one here for right now because this is my setup. But then you take all these black eldritch tentacles and you put them into the bag. So now you're increasing the chances of getting eldritch tentacles and powering him up so that he powers up faster. So you want to be really careful about balancing, and this is what this game's all about. It's about balancing the board, the resources on the board, so that things don't go accursed and causing more chaos on your city. The eldritch tentacles, now Cthulhu only has 2 spots, and on the 3rd eldritch tentacle that you pull, you pick up all those tentacles, put them back in the bag. That will allow you to put the tentacles in the discard mat into your bag. However, it also powers up Cthulhu. And that's how Cthulhu powers up. So it's important to try to not let the shamblers become accursed, putting more of the black eldritch tentacles into the bag, because that's going to power up Cthulhu really quick and things are going to go crazy. On your player cards, you also have spaces to collect your tentacles. You only get 2 as well. And on the 3rd one, your abilities become accursed. So you'll take all the tentacles off, and then you'll move your little brain token up on the delirium track. And if you get all the way to the top, you go insane, and then Cthulhu wins the game. So you're balancing your resources as well. After you spin the Wheel of Madness, you resolve the action. You'll come over here, you'll pull your tentacles out. One of the key mechanics of this game is when you start pulling tentacles out, it's 1 at a time. And that's important because you may pull one out that causes something to go accursed. You resolve that action, and then you continue pulling tentacles out. And you'll continue doing this until you've pulled all the tentacles out. And that is how you populate those in the city. So that's the first thing we do. The second thing we do is we look on the tail end of the Wheel of Madness, and whatever color shambler it landed on, you populate one of those into that city. And the last thing you're going to do with the Wheel of Madness is move Cthulhu to whatever city you just populated that Shambler in. So Cthulhu's constantly moving around the board, and Cthulhu is a wall. You, as a player, cannot move through a city where Cthulhu is or land on a city where Cthulhu is. And like this example, if you start your turn and you're in a city where Cthulhu is, the first action you have to take is move out of the city. So Cthulhu is constantly getting in your way, creating barriers on the board so that, well, what you wanted to do isn't going to happen this turn. So adds that extra bit of chaos. In the second phase of the game, when you're actually trying to close the portals, then the rule for Cthulhu changes slightly. Now you can enter into a city spot where Cthulhu is, and that is actually the only way you can close a portal is you have to be in the same location as Cthulhu, but you can also pass through because in the second phase of the game, Cthulhu is weakened, and now you can interact with Cthulhu on the board. So that's the first phase of a player turn. You take Cthulhu's action, you spin the Wheel of Madness, you resolve whatever action the front edge landed on, you populate tentacles in that city it landed on, and you populate a Shambler and move Cthulhu. On a player's turn, you have 3 actions you can take. You can increase these actions by spending Chaos Tentacles. Now, Chaos Tentacles are really cool because they are a wild tentacle. You can use them for any color. So if you're trying to banish a Shambler and you need to use 2 tentacles to banish the Shambler, let's say we're banishing a red one and we only have 1 red tentacle, a Chaos Tentacle can be used as a red tentacle. Also, they can be spent to give you another action. So they're just a good resource to have. The way you get these Chaos Tentacles is the game starts you out with a couple tentacles. This is a 2-player setup, and in a 2-player setup you get 2 tentacles. And in larger games you only get 1 tentacle to start with. As you saw earlier, I spun the Wheel of Madness. I got to put a Chaos Tentacle in the discard mat. And once Cthulhu powers up, or I get the black tentacles onto Cthulhu, I'll get to take all those and put them into my tentacle bag. The other way to get Chaos Tentacles is by translating the pages of the Necronomicon. Every time you complete a row, you get the tentacle that's associated. So either direction, those are the tentacles you'll get. So by the time you've translated all the pages, you're going to have 10 Chaos Tentacles, hopefully, in your bag. They can also leave play. It's one of the evil things the Cthulhu Legends like to do. In the first phase of the game, there are 5 actions a player can take. The first one is simple. You can move. You can move to one location, adjacent location, as long as Cthulhu's not in it. And if you're in a location where Cthulhu is, you must move first. But yeah, you can just move. Now, as you collect tentacles, if you get blue tentacles, those allow you to move more so that you can get around the board a little bit easier. A second action we can take is we can take the city action that we're in. So if we wanted to do the city action first, we can move 1, 2, or 3 of the same colored Madness tentacles from the Shambler mat to our discard mat. So I could pick up all these red tentacles and drop them down. This is where you're trying to balance what's in the bag versus what's on the board. So if you just don't have a lot of one of the colored tentacles, you're going to want to start moving them down from the Shambler's mat. This is the Abyss, where you can't draw from this pile. You have to earn them. You have to bring them into your discard mat. So that's your second action that you could possibly take. A third action could be collecting tentacles, and all you're going to do is pick them up and put them on your character sheet. You get 1 tentacle for the action unless you have green tentacles. The more green tentacles you have, which are your greed, allow you to pull more tentacles from the city location. At the start of a game, those are really good to have. so that you can start getting things in action. This isn't a game that ramps up slowly. This is a game that just starts playing quickly, and you want to get those tentacles and get around the board, banishing the shamblers as quickly as possible. Another action you can take is banishing shamblers. This is the combat phase, and you're going to use these cool Cthulhu dice. These are three-sided dice. You have this Cthulhu symbol on two sides. That represents 0. You have a single tentacle. That represents a 1. And then you have these double tentacles. That represents a 2. So to banish a shambler, you roll the number of dice that there are shamblers in the location, and the highest result. So if we rolled 3 dice and we got a 0, 1, and a 2, you always take the highest value, and that's the number of tentacles you have to spend. You have to spend the color of tentacles that represent the shambler you're banishing. So you get to choose which one. So if you have this situation, if you have the blue tentacles, you can replace, you can get rid of the blue one. If you have red tentacles, you can get rid of the red one. However, don't forget, chaos tentacles are wild, so you can use one of your wild tentacles to represent a color so that you can banish your shamblers. And they just go into the abyss here, and that's it. That was combat. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. The last thing you can do is translate the pages of the Necronomicon. So you notice this one's already flipped over. That is part of setup, because when you start the game, wherever Cthulhu starts, you flip over the card. All the rest of the cards are face down. So as you move, wherever you land, you flip over that particular card. And you'll see on the cards the number of tentacles you have to spend to translate that card. So I would have to spend 1 blue, 2 red, and a green to translate that one. On this one, I need to spend a red and a green to translate those pages. And then you see these little numbers here. What you're going to do is you're just going to start filling in the numbers according to the card. So we have a 1, a 2, a 4, and a 5. Then this becomes my player's translated card. I'll put that over on my player, and I'll use that in phase 2 to close the 6 portals. You're collecting the same colors because each one of the colors you collect represents a dice that you get to roll, which is how you shut the portals. So you're set collecting there. Now, once you fill up a row, like let's say the next one I get a 3. Whoever fills it up gets to take this chaos tentacle. Now, let's say the scientist filled it up. Well, he's already got 2 chaos tentacles. That means I just accursed my chaos tentacles, which means I have too many. So all of these go away, and I increase my delirium. And as you increase your delirium, you can go insane, and that will mean Cthulhu wins. You have this little dice symbol with an arrow, meaning you've now also earned a reroll. So you can reroll 1 of your dice. As you go up, you can reroll 2 of your dice and 3 of your dice. So you're actually wanting to dance on the edge of insanity so that you can get dice rerolls. So that way in the second phase, when you go to close the portals, you can reroll your dice so that you have a better chance of success. In the first phase, we are translating the pages of the Necronomicon. In the second phase, you're going around trying to close the different portals that Cthulhu's been using to release chaos on the city. See these numbers inside of here. So as we're collecting cards, let's say I've got these 2 cards. I have 2 greens, so that allows me to roll 2 dice. And what I'm looking for the first portal to close is just 1 success. So I roll, I have my 1 success. Don't forget the Cthulhu symbol's a 0. So I've closed that 1 portal. And then when I go to close the second portal, I've got to get 2 successes. And I got my 2 successes. So I've closed those 2 portals. That is the action you'll start taking in the second phase of the game after you've translated all of the pages of the Necronomicon. So you do have those two different phases of the game. I do enjoy playing this game. I've been playing it a lot, and I find it easily enjoyable playing with just two regular characters because there's not a lot of narrative taking place in the game. This is just very much a mechanical game where you're just going around doing different things, and it's just kind of puzzly. You've got to figure out where you want to go and where everything's at so that way you can take advantage of the chaos that Cthulhu's releasing. There's going to be plenty of times in this game where you're going to let Cthulhu just power up because you need to get the tentacles and the discard mat into your bag so you can start drawing more tentacles. It's just that simple. As you're balancing everything out, it's actually a lot of fun. And that's just my general overview of this game. In the next video, we're going to go through setup so you understand how all of this stuff gets put on the table. It's not hard to set up. It actually goes quite easily, especially if you just do some organizing, storing your game, makes setup a breeze. And we'll spin the wheel of madness a few times so I can show you the mechanics in action so you have a real good understanding of how a turn goes. And in the third video, we're just going to go over the solo mechanics and the expansion material so that the game just has a little bit more chaos and complexity. So for now, thank you for watching and have a great day.